Hello and welcome everyone to a very special live stream today with the team from Oracle. They've been incredibly motivated to dive into contributions around all of our cloud native communities. And it sounds like this is going to be the first of many of these sessions. I'm really excited to hear more of their experiences today. In today's session, the team will be presenting their perspectives on cloud native adoption in an enterprise setting. This is an official live stream of the CNCF, and as such is subject to the CNCF Code of Conduct. Please don't add anything to the chat or questions that would be in violation of that Code of Conduct. Please be respectful to all fellow participants and presenters. Be excellent to one another. With that, I would like to hand it over to Rob to kick off today's presentation. With that, Rob, please take it away.
Hey, thanks, Taylor. Appreciate it. It has been a great pleasure working with the CNCF, especially over the last 6 months. And we've had some real good collaboration in terms of webinars and other streams of projects. And I really look forward for the series of webinars that we're going to do jointly with CNCF, Oracle, and CNCF. And my role within Oracle is I lead open source initiatives for Oracle Cloud. And I'm very excited to have this panel of speakers here who are extremely qualified when it comes to cloud native. And with that, I'll pass it on to the lead speaker of today's session, Nova.
Hi everybody. Welcome. Here at Oracle, we've got quite a bit of involvement in a lot of different open source ecosystems, including the CNCF, Linux Foundation. We are, we're integrating with pieces, we're contributing back to them, we're doing our part to be good citizens, and we want to share our knowledge and our experiences where we can. So for this particular session, we're leading up to a major conference. We've got KubeCon coming up next week in Detroit. For those of you who are watching this after the fact, now you'll know when this took place. And typically there's a lot of conference-led development. You've got people who are going to talk your ear off about new developments, projects, integrations, releases, new products, versions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And knowing that that was going to be flooding your stream, we wanted to give everybody a little bit of a break from that. So we're here to give you value based not on what we're trying to announce, but based on our experiences, with the expectation that anyone who might be attending the conference, whether it's going to be physically, virtually, watching the videos weeks or months from now on YouTube, or just considering the content and trying to ingest it all, that when you're trying to get those takeaways from the sessions that you can bring home, that you can apply to your day job, that the insight that we'll be able to share here can help you get additional value out of the event, out of the sessions that you're going to watch, and about just in general being able to apply these principles to whatever it is you're working with. So the people we've got today, we've got a handful of folks, and they represent several different product teams from within Oracle. We've got some apps folks, we've got some platforms, some services, some blended offerings. And as much as we all think that all of our particular products, our projects, they're all a special snowflake, they're all our baby, and they're all individual and not like anybody else's, the truth is that, there will be a little bit that will make it special, but most of the patterns that are going to come up are going to be patterns that you'll see again and again. They're not going to be that different, especially in a large enterprise environment like we're in. So we're here today to ask the panelists a handful of questions. We're going to ask each of the teams to answer each of our questions, and then you, the viewer, can compare and contrast mentally those answers while you're ingesting that future content. And we hope it's going to provide some perspective on how you ingest the content and how you approach learning and making it part of your daily life. So we don't have any slides or anything. This is just going to be a lot of Q&A. And we're going to start with some introductions. I'll start with myself. I am Noah Abrahams. I am first a CNCF ambassador and now a senior principal technical program manager here at Oracle. And my day job, which is this, revolves around enabling people who want to contribute to CNCF projects, contribute to the ecosystems, and generally being a good citizen. So I went first because I don't have a product or project on the line here. Now, for each of the panelists, I want you, in a couple of sentences, introduce yourself, and also if you could very briefly describe your product or project that you work on, so that when we go through these questions, people will understand, oh, that's a person who works on X, Y, or Z. I'm just going to go by who's on my screen in order. So I'm going to start with Brad.
Thanks, Noah. I'm Brad Sargent. I'm a senior architect for Oracle CX Marketing. I've been with Oracle for over 22 years. We have B2B and B2C SaaS marketing products that we sell and build, and also CDP that we have. We're also developing and selling. I've been working in SaaS I've been architect in SaaS for the whole time, been at Oracle 23 years, really, Oracle, and before that Responses, which Oracle bought. And been working in containers since probably 2016 is when we had to make the change from our own bare metal servers into start using more of the open source and container mechanisms. It was probably around that era, 2016, and since then it's been straight on till morning.
Awesome. Next introduction, let's go to Subankar.
Hey, hi Noah, thanks for that. Good morning, good evening, to folks joining from everywhere. So my name is Shubhankar. So I'm part of Oracle Applications Lab, OAL here. It's an internal team within Oracle, and we kind of manage all of Oracle SaaS implementations, so HR, sales, finance, all of that actually. And we also build the extensions to those SaaS applications on the platform and the infrastructure side of it actually. I have been involved with CNCF projects for a little over 5 years now actually, starting off with Kubernetes Service Mesh and a couple of other projects around it. And I basically lead the platform and infrastructure engineering team here at OAL, and primarily responsible for app modernization and cloud native adoption within the organization.
Awesome. Thank you. Moving along, Udayan.
Hey guys, hello everyone. I'm Udayan Sahu. I work with Brad in the same organization, basically working on CX marketing platform, both B2B and B2C. As my role in Oracle, before Oracle, I had done a couple of startups and love to play with new technologies. And luckily in Oracle also, I got a similar role where I'm basically typically look at newer technologies and their adoption, relevance to the product and other things. And when we started our move into OCI, that's where picked up multiple CNCF projects and evaluated many of them. As the vision was to go infrastructure as a code, and this they had really good things to offer along. We are still excited with the products which they offer, and looking forward how they evolve from here. Thank you.
Awesome.
Back to you, Noah.
And last but certainly not least, we'll pass it over to Sandy.
Cool. Thanks, Noah. Hey, everyone. My name is Sandeep Gurum. I'm part of CX Service Organization. So my journey with cloud native started with really a need of releasing software faster. We started with, like, hey, we really need to get our software out there faster. What can we do? And then we just, one thing after the other, we kept on exploring more and more cloud native, and here we are, 5-6 years later, we're fully cloud native in everything we develop, in all the new applications. So yeah, that's kind of how our journey started, with the need to get software out there faster.
Awesome. Thank you. You've all sort of touched on the first question that I wanted to dive into, which is, how did your project start using the cloud native ecosystem? How did you get involved with using the projects? And it sounds like nobody really started there, that there was an evolution. So if people could talk a little bit about what the evolution was for incorporating CNCF projects into what you were working on and what you were building, that would be fantastic as well. Let's go back to the topic and start with Brad.
Yeah, it was an interesting, we sort of backed into this. We had been building our own data centers for a long time, since 2000, really 1999, really, and doing SaaS products and using bare metal. Oracle bought responses that I was architect for in 2014, and we were having to convert over to use these large computing systems, much too big for a single application. And so we first looked at VMs to try and solve that problem, but the VMs had performance limitations for maybe 15-20% of our applications, created too much latency. We have a lot of different complex systems we had to develop, and the latency and the throughput was really critical. So we thought, well, let's look at containers, and I was actually given the job to do that, and found that I could use container technology and have basically no overhead in I/O. And we used Mac VLAN for our network connection, so the network was really fast and direct connection for that. I ended up taking all the legacy applications and converting them into containers in 2016, and that was still in our legacy data centers, or data centers we were running. Over the next couple of years, we evolved and picked up more and more open source technology from that, and we moved to the OCI. And in the process of moving to OCI, we picked up Kubernetes. Before that, we had been using Docker Compose on individual machines, and using Prometheus and FileBeat and Node Exporter and things like that to handle that ourselves. Moving to OCI opened it up quite a bit, and then we focused on how we could use Kubernetes to provide a more elastic, more live environment, where we weren't managing our containers and statically allocating the individual servers. So that really shifted for us around 2018. And then once we were in OCI, it just, in that environment, we were able to be much more cloud native in all of our approaches, automating everything, and using things like we're using, like I mentioned, Prometheus, and I didn't write it down. A bunch of projects that are actually even newer came up. What's the great project that is the workflow engine?
Argo.
So we're using Argo for custom ETL, which has really been a lifesaver for us. Cute little project, and that's actually more recent. So anyway, it continues to evolve. Now Udayan is more hands-on on that stuff, so I'll let him talk more about the details going forward and the more modern stuff we're doing. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Yeah, basically, as we started evolving, and as we started seeing our goals. So one of the goals when we were doing with Docker Compose and other things, it took a kind of kind of quite a bit of a time to actually maintain the container states and even the deployment. So like when we moved into OCI, the goal was like, okay, how can we cut down a 3-month deployment period to probably weeks? And that was made possible, like Kubernetes and other things. Uh, they really managed those things well, and taken basically gave us a really leg up as we moved along. Uh, yeah, there were. Okay, I'll pass probably. I can keep talking on this topic, but let's hear from other panelists. Yeah.
Okay, let's pass it over to Subankar for the same
Hey, thanks,
question
Noah.
about evolution.
Good. Yeah, so our journey is kind of similar, but more on the platform side of things. So as I said, so the organization itself is huge. So we have about like 500 to 1,000 developers actually, right? So across various functional groups. Now, our journey, like we run these corporate applications which are running in our legacy data centers for more than a decade or so, and there was this push from management back in 2015 to 16 when they wanted to move everything from on-premise data centers to OCI, and also on the SaaS side of things, we wanted to move to the Oracle Cloud ERP, Cloud HCM, and all those, right? So there was a need to modernize these applications, and the monolith applications which are built for years. I mean, we looked at how we could re-architect those and come up with a microservice platform actually. So because that was the crux of it, and to make sure all these developers are able to build agile applications and also meet our timelines, aggressive timelines. So we looked at various things. So we started off initially by running something on container cloud service, which was built on Docker Swarm. This was back in 2017, but the world has already moved around Kubernetes back then. So 2018, roughly, I joined the KubeCon in Seattle, and that's where we kind of opened up to the whole ecosystem, right? It's not just Kubernetes, actually. There is a whole ecosystem around it where you have several of these CNCF projects that enable you to build this platform thing, right? So we come back and start putting together the pieces, and then we decided the base of the platform is going to be obviously Kubernetes, and luckily OCI had a managed Kubernetes offering back then, which was OKE. That helped us a lot because Kubernetes itself is complex, so you don't want to be managing it on your own. Actually, the control plane at least. So we took that as the basis of our platform, and then what we needed on top of it was a service mesh. Because one of the challenge that we kind of heard from all our developers is when you move to microservices, you have to address all of these issues around service load balancing, security, circuit breaker pattern, and observability, and all of that. Right. So we didn't want our developers to start coding for each of those individually, right? And this is a polyglot environment. Like we have Java containers, Python containers, Node containers, so and on various versions. So we wanted to standardize the stack, and that's where we picked up Istio because that was the leading service mesh back then, actually. And so we kind of had Kubernetes with OK Istio on top of it, and then we kind of added a lot more services around deployment automation, which is where we used a combination of Jenkins and Argo. And then we have our own observability solution using Grafana, Prometheus. Then the log aggregation happened using EFK stack, like we had Fluent, Elastic, and all that. So yeah, I mean, if you can see, like the whole platform play was not just giving vanilla Kubernetes, but the entire gamut of services around it, so that as a developer, they just keep the focus on the code development, and the rest of the things is taken care by the platform. So that's how we have been evolving actually. And like right now, I would say like we are spanning across like hundreds of worker nodes with thousands of cores running actually, right? Production applications for the last couple of years. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks. Um, let's move on and take the same question for Sandeep.
Cool.
Tell
Thanks,
us
Noah.
about your evolution.
Yeah. So although we arrived pretty much nearly the same spot as what Brad, Subhankar, and Udayan mentioned. Our journey was a little, it was a little bit different. So our need to move into cloud native started out with we wanted to get our software out there faster. That was the basis. But there are also other constraints that we're starting to run against in 2015-16 timeframe. Like that's kind of the time frame where Oracle and a lot of it, as Subhankar mentioned, like we're moving our on-premise, our own data centers to our OCI cloud, and like we were not expanding our footprint in our legacy data centers. So we wanted to use our existing resources more efficiently until we make that transition, and combine that with, we also need, at the time we were doing our quarterly deliveries, we really wanted to cut that down to like weekly, bi-weekly as so putting those two together, we started out with we need to break our monolith down. So we introduced service discovery, and that's how, we were able to decouple pieces and then have those communicate back and forth with service discovery. That's our first step into like the cloud native journey. And at the time, and we also wanted to use our resources efficiently. At the time, we were just running one service per VM, and yes, we have multiple instances of it, but they're not all getting used at the same time. So that's kind of where like we really need a scheduler. Like we need to use our resource efficiently, so we can we can get another year or two of runtime before we move to cloud. We have more resources available for us. So we actually started out with Nomad and Orchestrator or Java processes for a good 6 months or so. We continued doing that, and that's kind of when we started our transition to OCI. That's we have managed Kubernetes available for us, and which made it a lot more developer friendly. So until that point, a lot of our investment was to how to operate what our developers write in a more efficient way and decouple them, and then how can we enable our developers to take advantage of all the self-service they can do, all the tooling that's starting to be available with Kubernetes. So I think it's about 2000, later than 17, 18 is when we've our transition to like more developer focused, less ops focused, and more developer focused on how to enable developers to take advantage of schedulers and service discovery. So that's kind of where we are transition to a developer centric cloud native ecosystem. And that's when we started introducing, developer can get an environment with push of a button, and then start deploying us and get a namespace, get the whole supporting ecosystem like Shubhankar mentioned, Prometheus, Grafana, and tracing. It's just out of the box. As long as you comply with a certain contract that's established as part of our platform, you can just start developing, getting all the benefits without having to think about it, as long as you meet this contract. That opened up like rich observability and ability to like see what's going on within their services. All of that just made it's eye-opening for a lot of developers who didn't have that ability until that point. And also it's reduced stress on the ops side of who are dealing with day to day. That's when like overlap between ops and dev. We started closing gap between what was ops and dev. Now we're getting closer and closer to DevOps. So that's kind of our transition. 5 years later, until recently, a few weeks ago, like I was running that our cloud native developer platform, which provided basically all of the tooling, observability tooling, and CI/CD. We used Argo CD to deploy, enable developers to deploy apps themselves as frequently as they can. We went from 3 months to 2 weeks to like whenever you want. So yeah, that's kind of our evolution towards cloud native.
Awesome. I love it. So I think the next set of questions that we want to ask, now that everybody's told us a bit about how they got there and the what happened, is we want to talk a little bit about the why and the decision processes that went around, not just how it was built and architected, but around the projects themselves, and how they got incorporated. We'd like to talk a little bit about why were the particular projects chosen. Was there just a following the tide, because everybody's doing Kubernetes. Were there technical decisions? Were there political decisions? I know if people are watching and they're interested in what it's like in an enterprise setting, everybody's going to go, oh, how much did politics push down from the top to make sure that this was going to happen? So I want to ask everybody, talk about the decisions, talk about autonomy, etc. And we'll go back to the top and start with Brad again.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting question. I already mentioned that we originally got into the container world because having to deal with a large metal and needed to be able to abstract it and not lose I/O and network efficiency, and we were able to do that with containers. And I mentioned that we started out in our legacy data centers, doing everything with Docker Compose and handcrafting it on each server with making sure that we had the right mix of containers that played well together, and that whole process was manageable because we had a small number of servers. Moving to OCI was a mandate that Oracle has had for its SaaS organizations because of the operational efficiency and the higher level of security, and there are many reasons for that. So that's definitely motivated by policy from our organization. So in working to how do we get there, I was originally tasked to do that as well, and so I looked at. We were in OCI, and I was basically replicating what I had done in the legacy data center, using Docker Compose and building, a few machines to build smaller deployments. And the upper level VP said, no, you have to use Kubernetes. In fact, you have to use OKE, and OKE was just coming out with limited availability. And so I ended up being there in the first week when the managed Kubernetes that Oracle provides at OCI called OKE, when it was available. So that's in 2018 early. That's how we actually got in. We were told I was going to use Kubernetes. I had known when I first started, I'd been working for maybe 6 months in containers, and I looked at Swarm, and I'd looked at various things, and I said Kubernetes is what I want to use, but I'm going to wait. I wanted to we have a lot of things we're doing. I didn't want to go right away into Kubernetes, but when we were in OCI, it was basically a mandate. I was all for it, but I was going to wait a year. But no, they said you have to do it up front. So that was that decision. So in getting into it, another thing that was interesting is coming from our own data center environment. The security, we always used firewalls, and so I was very knowledgeable in managing the security using firewalls. Well, there's no firewalls in OCI, and we had to. And when you're using Kubernetes, the way to a lot of this can be handled to get the security you need is with network policies. But network policies are not automatically enforced by Kubernetes, and so you have to come up with how are you going to enforce network policies. And so I think Sudhakar mentioned that he used Istio. I looked at Istio and I looked at Calico, and so both open source, both great tools. And for my world, I thought, boy, Istio looks really interesting, but it was a bigger commitment. It's a framework, and it was a lot more at that time to get into and get involved and adopt all the different aspects of it. Calico was a much more surgical tool that I could use as a plugin into Kubernetes and do the enforcement of the network policies to take the place of, to get the security we needed on a per container basis, to take the place of what we used to do with firewalls technology in our own data centers. And so I went the other way. So Sudhakar went with Istio, and I went with Calico. And so we're still using Calico. It still works for us. I do really see the value in Istio. It's just that that was the trade-off we made because we had so much other things and complexity, and also a lot of legacy applications that we just had to keep going. They make a lot of money for us, and that we've developed them for over 20 years. They're complex, multi-threaded. Some of these are heavy things. We're moving more and more into microservices, and all the new stuff we're doing is with microservices, but we still have these powerhouse complex applications, and so we're not able to just rewrite everything that we built over the last 20 years and is making a lot of money for us. So that's the trade-off we made. I just wanted to mention that was a decision I made on Calico. the decision for OKE and Kubernetes up front was really a management decision, which turned out to be the best one for us. The only other thing I'll mention is that when we started, we built a lot of stuff by hand. I wanted everything to be automated, but I got a lot of pushbacks from managers in terms of time they had. It was going to take too long. We went through a couple of smaller projects, new applications that we had built and published, a couple of those. When we got to the main product we were putting out in 2020, I put my foot down and said, everything is going to be automated, because we have to deploy all around the world, like 40, 50 deployments, separate deployments of these systems. We cannot do this manually. So we use Terraform. In the past, we'd used Chef in our legacy environments, but we switched to Ansible because it was a little bit easier to use, a little more flexible as well, and a little less complicated for us. And everything we do is now required to be automated. That took a lot longer up front. It's a lot more of an investment, but it's really important. I think that's one thing I wanted to just provide as my advice, is really try and value complete automation in your systems rather than requiring to do things manually. It makes a big difference in the long term.
Awesome.
That's what I wanted to.
Love it. Love it. Let's go over to Subankar next. I'm going to skip this time around.
Sure. So yeah, I think like to the question around political versus technical playing a part in choosing some of these projects. Again, I mean, like I'll relate to what Brad mentioned. Like I believe Oracle had a corporate mandate to move all our on-premise data centers over to OCI, right? I think it made sense for the organization. It was a strategic decision for the organization. So kind of like all the teams, internal teams and product teams were kind of moving towards that. And we obviously, since we were running on on-premise data centers, we had to. And these are like these applications that we manage are kind of the bread and butter for Oracle's own business, right? So these are actually Oracle's own sales system, HR system, payroll, and all. So for us, I think the most crucial aspect of it was time, right? So speed of delivery for the developers, how rapidly they could iterate and rebuild some of these applications to make them cloud native. That was very important. So the platform was very important, and I think we had full backing from management for picking up Kubernetes or the technology that could facilitate this speed of delivery. As far as picking up other projects on the CNCF landscape, those are purely like technical decisions. And I think, I mean, if you look at the whole ecosystem of the CNCF landscape, I think that's pretty massive. 2018 KubeCon, 2022 KubeCon, I think the number of projects that are there in that is mind-boggling, actually, right? So tough to even fit into one page where you can actually see all the projects and tiny little icons. And there are so many overlapping functionalities in a lot of these projects, actually, right? So it's very tough, actually. So if I'm working on picking something on the security side, maybe there are like 50 projects out there which are trying to do something similar, right? So how do you pick the right project which you can maintain over time and which also meets all your requirements? So I would give a couple of examples. I mean, like on the security front, pod security policies, right? So that was one of the core requirements for us to make sure that our developers are not running privileged containers, right? And if you look at the ecosystem again, there are so many tools out there. We have OPA, we have Kyverno, Policy Engine. There's so many projects which kind of meet the same requirement. So for us, when we are picking up some of these projects, it was very important that we can maintain that over time. So in our case, between OPA and Kyverno, we picked up Kyverno because Kyverno is, again, the same Kubernetes resources or YAML, and we didn't have to learn a new language or new constructs, which is needed for OPA. But functionality-wise, they kind of give the same kind of functionality, right? So that was a decision that we had to make, right? Which tool to use. Same goes with service mesh again. I mean, like between Istio and at that point, I think CNCF had Linkerd, which was their primary graduated project, I would say, for service mesh. But again, when evaluating both, we kind of looked at what functionalities do both of them provide. And with Linkerd, there were a couple of core constructs which are missing. Like Linkerd didn't have an ingress of its own, so we had to add an ingress on top of that, and there were a couple of other functionalities missing. But Istio kind of came with all those functionalities inbuilt, right? So we didn't want to, again, like when we are adding a framework, we didn't want to keep on adding additional add-ons on top of the framework. So these are some of the decisions that we had to make while picking up some of these CNCF projects. And then obviously, like when we are picking up some of these, we also look at long term, how do we maintain it, right? Another example would be, let's say we are using the EFK stack for our logging. Now, tomorrow, I don't want Elastic. I want to switch it to some other backend, let's say OpenSearch. So what is the effort that goes into switching that, right? So I could keep Fluentd, but I could kind of change the backend of it from Elastic to OpenSearch, all the while making it seamless for the developer, right? The developer doesn't have to worry about what is going in the background actually. So those are some of the decisions that goes behind picking some of these projects. And again, I mean, it is a continuously evolving thing. So the whole cloud native ecosystem moves so fast. So you have to keep looking at it every 3 to 6 months to make sure that your projects are staying up to date and you're trying to make the right bets at the right time, right? So, yeah.
Awesome. Sandeep, let's go over to you.
Sure. So one of the initial decisions we made was, if you look at, us starting out with Nomad for orchestration, it had some context to that, why we ended up doing that. So originally we wanted to start with containers, just running our applications in a container. But this was 2015, 2016. Again, as enterprise, we're very security conscious, and our ops teams, there's a lot of discussion on security of the containers at the time. And for us, we really needed to move. Again, our focus was moving fast and delivering fast. So yeah, we had to make a decision. Right, if we're taking time to do containers, let's just go with Nomad, which can do just Java process orchestration. For us, we needed efficiency. We need an orchestrator. Nomad could do or Java process orchestration or any binary orchestration. So that was one of the decisions. And we ended up doing a more surgical approach. Okay, we need this now. This provides that and allows us to move to the next level. So our journey was very surgical in the beginning to get us to what we need at that moment. And then we slowly started evolving, and and again, it's the same as what Brad mentioned. When OK was available, it was kind of Oracle wide. Okay, we are adopting Kubernetes. At that point, it was like, great. We've been waiting for that, and we're going to jump on that and just ride that train. And that's going to be, we ended up taking as soon as the OK was available. That was just great for us, and we started. At that point, that removed any questions about container or not, because Kubernetes is container orchestration. So yeah, that which was great for us, and that accelerated adoption to cloud native landscape. Let's see, in terms of other decisions, I don't know. I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay. There is one, I think, tangential question off of that, and Subhankar alluded to this in his mention of the projects having really high velocity. And I'll give this as a toss-up to whoever wants to take this question. In the context of how the projects continue to evolve and the longevity of the individual projects, how much build versus buy came into the adoption of the projects as a long-term maintenance decision? And I'll give that to whoever wants to take that particular question.
I'll take it.
Okay.
The reason being, one of the CNCF project is Helm. So when we started our journey back in 2018, that time Helm was at 1.0 version. And because we wanted to automate things from get-go, and the way Helm was positioned at that point of time, we had to actually build our own orchestration of using directly Kubernetes APIs and other things, and for the the overall deployment project. But like you say, these projects evolve over time. Within 2 years, when Helm 3.0 was released, we reevaluated our decision, because anything which you build, you have to keep investing and maintaining and doing all those things around it. And probably around last year, we actually pivoted again and started using Helm with Helm file to actually satisfy our needs. And that's where we actually stopped funding our build part, and we went into and adopted something which was off the shelf and which matured over time to suit our needs.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So the trade-off, you have to have the functionality. You'd rather not have to build it and maintain it if it isn't your core, your core strength, or what you're building for your customers. But it's got to have the functionality. But otherwise, it really makes a lot of sense to leverage these open source technologies that are providing what you need, even if you have to cobble them together. But then you have to stay on top of it. You really do have to keep the versions. That's the other side, is there is a cost of ownership, which is you can't be letting things get too old. You have to keep evolving. So it's an investment ongoing.
I think that's something that a lot of people don't consider in the context of build versus buy. That buy could mean dollars, or it could mean your time and human power.
It means both usually.
Yeah, indirectly. I think indirectly it's all dollar at the end of the day, right? I mean, even if so the time that I would say, like, the time that we spent on maintaining some of these, upgrading them, I mean, like, look at the rapid versions that come out. I mean, Kubernetes almost like every year there are 4 versions. I mean, same goes with Istio and then some of these other projects. So you have like security vulnerabilities, CVs popping up all the time, and you have to stay on top of all of this. And there is a lot of man hours that goes into just maintaining these. I mean, the whole ecosystem, actually, right?
Which is why it's so critical to automate. You've got to automate all this stuff so that you can, you have less overhead in updating to newer versions, fixes, whatever. Very critical.
Exactly. Yep. Sure.
So let's take that in a slightly different direction now. We've got a scenario where everybody's got your projects, they're all built up. And we've talked about the decisions that went into them, but let's talk about sort of the unseen parts. Let's talk about speed bumps. In the journey, everybody's going to run into issues, things that took longer than they expected, things that, were problems that you ran into. It's going to happen. So within each of these development life cycles, what came up that you had planned for, that you said, this is going to take long, and it took 6 months instead of 3 months, that you were able to plan for? And what came up that was completely unexpected, that, instead of being able to plan for it, that you had to deal with it? So let's go in reverse order for this one. We'll start with Sandeep.
Yeah. So when we started, once we got on Kubernetes, like, we were really excited, and we were, we tried to go all in. We had our observability with tracing, time series, and then we also have our service mesh up and running. And then now we started adding more developers and enabling everybody to be able to do everything. And a few weeks in, it created more noise than velocity. Like, one thing we learned at that point is, like, we had to back off. Like, we had to start small. In fact, we pulled our service mesh out, and we didn't even go with service mesh to production. And even though it's it decoupled, it just caused more noise with development teams trying to adapt. It's overwhelming sometimes. Like, once you came in, you instrument your applications, and then you add your tracing, and it's like what you used to do before, what you do in cloud native applications, you're putting a lot of things in ahead of time, but taking that transition is in the beginning, it was hard for a lot of our developers. I'd say that was a speed bump, and that was a lesson. Do not start with all of it. Like, just start as small as you can while still getting your achieving your business objectives. Just because we can do tracing, we can do service mesh, it doesn't mean you should do it all at once. Just focus on your business and see what improves that, and then just start there and just add more and more as you're trying to solve problems. I feel like that we had to learn that the hard way, and yeah, I'd say that was our lesson in the beginning. Adding more developers just slowed it down in the beginning with everything new set of frameworks and such.
Great, thank you. Same question over to Subhankar.
Hey, I would agree with Sandeep. I mean, when we had similar kind of experience, right? So when you do this platform play, like obviously, like everyone's excited to get onto the platform, but it takes time to build a production-ready platform, to be honest, actually, right? So with all the bells and whistles around it, like, I mean, security is one of the core concerns here. Like Kubernetes security has a lot of elements to it, actually. Like starting from like making sure you have like hardened images all the way till container scanning solutions, your like security on the runtime itself, right? Where you don't have privileged containers, you have restricted access between namespaces through network policies, your egress and ingress controls, all of that, right? I mean, it takes time to build all of those. So one thing that we learned is obviously like we went slow. I mean, we started off with maybe a couple of teams, like 2 or 3 core teams. We wanted to do the end-to-end workflow just to make sure that the whole platform, the value of the platform can be demonstrated, right? And it's not just like on the deployment automation of it, like how they secure containers, but also like once the containers are live, how do you observe them, right? Be on metrics, traces, logs, all of this. How do you correlate them? If there is an issue, like now you're breaking down a monolith into maybe 10 different microservices, you have 10 different failure points. So how do you basically correlate the traces to the metrics to the logs, and then end of the day, like give it to the developer saying that, hey, you have an issue, this is how you kind of debug it, right? So it took us a while. I mean, good amount of time, maybe like 9 months to maybe a year, actually, just to get the whole production ready platform up and running. And then that's where once you started showing the value of it, then we had like knowledge transfer sessions with all the developers saying that, hey, this is how you can build, this is how you can observe. That's when we started seeing uptake of the platform more and more. And so that was one learning. And the other, from an ops standpoint, I would say, which was something that we underestimated, is the velocity with which these projects are being built and that you have to maintain. We had a very small team, actually, the ops team that was building the platform. So we had our hands full, actually, while building the platform, and at the same time maintaining it and making sure that we have all the automation around it to patch when there is a CV, or even just the regular cadence, upgrading and keeping it in sync with upstream versions. I mean, that was a challenge, actually, right? So it took us a while to again build those automation and have all of that in place. So those are something that we hadn't anticipated, because traditionally, when you do monolith and on-premise development, you don't run into these issues. But when you pick up open source projects, I mean, there are a lot of these factors that have to be considered. So I think that would be another speed bump or learning, I would say, that we had to factor in, actually.
Awesome, thank you. Let's go over to Udayan.
Yeah. So yeah, I think being in Oracle, the security being the topmost paramount, there are the processes itself make the overall deployment overwhelming. When you talked about speed bump, the instance which came to mind was more the way we had implemented. So what we had done is with multiple teams contributing their own containers, and basically with Kubernetes you have the cron jobs. So one of our DBA teams, they wanted to monitor the databases, and they started adding cron jobs, and within no time we didn't realize that there were so many cron jobs starting and stopping, and in the system it actually slowed down the whole system, because like suddenly at 10 a.m. tons of cron jobs will start up and try to do certain things, and so yeah, these tools are great.
Kubernetes
Yeah,
cron jobs, right?
cron jobs. Yeah, these tools are great. They enable you very quickly, or they empower you very quickly. But at the same time, if there is no governance placed in, they can basically it can become a very bigger problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just that was a kind of a big learning. We had to actually go back and redo a bunch of things just to go around the problem. Brad, you
Yeah,
wanted to add something? Yeah.
I was going
Good.
to second that. We had very much identical issues. Like one of the teams wrote cron job that kept failing, and then that spun up thousands, and then we took our masters down.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was before we had limits in place, and then we have limits on every namespace after that.
That's definitely a trial by fire issue that everybody learns is putting in limits and quotas. And
Yeah.
oh,
Exactly.
what do you mean? I auto scaled to 10,000 servers. I think there's so much good content here with all the experiences that I think we could talk for hours probably. But unfortunately, we have a time limit on this particular session. So I think we're going to try and end it there for the questions that we have lined up. I think there's some questions in the chat that people want to talk about. But I'm hoping that in general, that being able to have seen the similarities and differences from each of these teams and what they went through and how they made their journey through the adoption of cloud native, that it's going to help, the folks that are watching at home, assuming they're at home, that it'll help them understand, what gaps you might need to fill in your own knowledge as you're adopting these technologies, and that it'll help, when you're attending the conference. I hope you're all attending the conference, at least virtually. Then it'll help you figure out, your attention is going to be pulled in 20 different directions because there's how many talk tracks plus maintainer sessions plus the show floor if you're physically there and the hallway track and all the other ways that people on Twitter and in advertising and whatnot are going to try and pull your attention in all these directions. I hope that this is going to help everyone focus a little more and get a better experience out of the show. There's a lot of different opportunities to learn, and hopefully this was helpful to all of you as you either adopt this, expand your existing footprint, or just think about how you're going to approach the system. So shall we go to some of the questions that are in the chat? There was one that I thought was interesting, and is near and dear to my heart because I worked in that space previously, but I'm going to give it to the team. What is your perspective on Kubernetes cost management and any tools under the CNCF app? These as toss-ups.
Yeah, sure. I think we looked at Cube Cost actually, so that's one of the CNCF tools actually, Cube Cost, and I mean obviously we looked at it some time back. It's a nice little tool which kind of gives you. I mean, the way they have done it is they have plugins for each cloud provider. So they kind of pull in the billing pricing details from each cloud provider, and then they kind of go for the latest cost analysis that is available out there. So yeah, I think I mean if you're looking at CNCF projects, probably that is one tool that we have looked at. Which I mean, depending on what cloud provider you are using, there definitely that's something that you can leverage actually. Yeah.
For me, I'm going to comment on it because a lot of people forget that cost management and resource management are the same thing, and resources cost more than just money. So here's a plug for something I'm not really involved with, but that's okay. The CNCF has a tag devoted to environmental sustainability. And as you continue to use more resources, you are also using electricity, you are using power, you are using more air conditioning, et cetera, et cetera. And the impact that you have on your cost management also has an impact on the world at large.
Yep.
So
Agree.
something near and dear to my heart. Just wanted to get my 2 cents in there. I'll get off my soapbox now. Let's see. What are the other questions that we have in here? Observability, logging, and metrics is very important to ensure your apps and systems are monitored and healthy 24/7. What is your strategy, and are the tools that you are using CNCF sponsored projects? Again, a toss-up. Who wants it?
Yeah, I can go for it. We went full on CNCF on for tracing. We're using Jaeger for logging. We've used Loki, Grafana for observability, visualization. Let's see, Prometheus for time series, Thanos for our long-term time series database storage. So basically, each and every one of them were our CNCF projects.
Awesome. And related to another question up there, I don't even know the answer to this. Do we OCI offer Managed Prometheus? Does anyone know? I don't know.
Not as of now.
Yeah, not as of now. Yeah.
Not yet.
Internally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not external. Yeah.
Is that all of the questions that we have from the chat?
I think the cost benefit justification is a general question. Makes a lot of sense. If I said okay, I'll jump in and just say something about that. Coming from speaking as someone who managed their own data center for SaaS for 15 years, not using a public cloud like OCI before we went to OCI. We built everything, so we were responsible, for the compute, the databases, the networking, all the security, everything. Building this up from scratch in a data center. It took for the deployments we had. It would take a full year to do a full new deployment of the applications, which is complicated. Moving to OCI, we can do that in just a few weeks. Just maybe even in a brand new region, it takes about 6 weeks total. It's a huge difference. So the time it takes to deploy is a big part of the cost. You just can't cut down if you're doing it yourself. If you're in your own data center, I can't overstate the importance of the time value you gain in a cloud. Once you get it down, once you understand the tools, once you know how to do the automation, then the deployment times are just a very small fraction of what it takes to do it yourself in a data center. So I think it's a big cost benefit just in terms of the time you save and the employee time.
Yeah, and I just want to add to what Brad said. Moving to cloud definitely, has a lot of benefits. But one thing that we try to be very careful is we don't over provision and underutilize resources. That's very critical for us actually. We have seen. Obviously, you have this. You cut down your provisioning time and all of that, and developers are all happy. We want to get on board with all of this, but then we have to be very careful about how we use the resources actually and not waste them, right? So yeah,
which you really can't do if you're doing it yourself totally, right? Because you got to buy the hardware and it's going to sit. Whatever you use.
Exactly.
That's a big deal. And also the monitoring is always better in the clouds to know what you're doing and what you're using, and you're sharing it with other people. Yeah.
Right.
Well, thank you all. I think Taylor's about to start queuing up the Oscars music to play us off. So a huge thank you to Brad, Udayan, Subankar, and Sandeep. I hope everybody found this to be useful for all the perspective and all the experience that we could bring to you, our viewers. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take us out, Taylor.
Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much, Noah. Thank you all for joining and just sharing those stories. I feel like as we work through different cloud native contexts, that's the thing that we don't always get to hear, right? We're not always on the same teams. We have the same missions and objectives. We're working, same team, different company for sure, but we don't get to sit next to you all the time and hear what's going on. So it's really informative and interesting to hear kind of what the concerns are amongst folks within the community. So thank you so much for taking the time to share. I thank you all for joining us, whether you're watching in real time or, again, like Noah said, watching this many years from now. We've been trapped in amber. We've broken out. Help. Thank you so much for coming on by and joining us for another Cloud Native Live installment. Input. We hope to see you again soon. And for those looking forward to KubeCon Detroit here in North America, hope to see you there as well. Thanks again. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.